Okay, we are live. Okay, hello everyone. I'm not sure if anyone watching, but yeah, hello. So here today, I don't know, with that gimmicky title, I don't think many people really got what we're gonna talk about, but yeah, I
Including us,
think,
probably.
I mean, we have a rough idea what we're gonna talk about, but there were a couple of interesting comments that before we start, I just would like to read. Uh, so one was like half of, so it was like in response of like what if? Well, half of the wars in the world would not be happening because imagine no heaven above us and no religion too. I mean, the second part is most like a personal opinion, like I guess, uh, which can take a long time to like, and I wouldn't discuss this without that person being here, basically. But
Yes.
about the comment, the first part is actually not true. So there's actual research uh, that actually debunked it. Like most of the wars around history were in the religious wars. I think people get confused because a lot of times the religion might provide the justification,
Hmm.
but they're not religious wars. So the religion wasn't the reason of the war.
So
Uh,
like the Crusades were actually just a power and land grab
I mean, you
for
can
the
class
Middle
crusades
East,
as religious wars, to be honest, because they
but
were like,
it was actually about getting power
yeah,
and influence.
yeah.
It it,
So
wa-
they
it
they,
was
they class as religious, but most of the wars, like he said, like the two world wars, for instance, they were religious wars. All uh, the wars of Roman Empire, or like the
yeah
Genghis Khan, all of them, they were religious wars. It was like pure
wars of
bloodshed.
conquest.
Yeah, probably countries. Religion was coming with it. But
It's a convenient excuse to make people
yeah,
enlist.
yeah, basically.
Um,
And the other one was like history shows that man will still worship something. It's not the object of greater being, etc. Responding because war function divisions it man making rules to subdue others to their will. At the base level, faith is whatever form starts with love. We bring in the worst parts. The object God, Buddha, Allah, etc. didn't put cruel words in our mouths or lift up arms. We did. So that was a nice comment, to be honest. I mean, that's just like I don't know who those people are, so I don't have any context on where they're coming from. So I just, you know, commenting on what I understand.
mm.
But yeah, that's actually true, isn't it? Like, uh, you can say even like, you know, I don't know, socialism, for instance, like free healthcare. Socialism has free healthcare for everyone, but then some countries took it and abused people.
Yeah.
So
So,
everything,
sadly, we live in a fallen world, and
yeah,
people
anything can
will
be
always.
used for to justify. If I want to justify something, I think what often happens when we start from a wrong place. So we already made our minds,
Mm.
and then I'm going to the Bible to find I'll go into the Bible to find justification about. It's the same like how slavery was excused, isn't it?
Mm.
For centuries, like, I'm a slave owner. I'll make millions on human exploitation, and then I just need a God that is with me. Like, so I just found that God. There it is.
Or indeed the odd serial killer. Oh, God told me to do it. You know.
I mean, I think that might be a little more complicated. We go into mental health, and you need what
Yeah,
goes.
maybe. But
You may be
no.
like talking about schizophrenia, like that. Anyway,
So I guess that leads me to a question. So the first comment, particularly, I mean, if there's no heaven and no religions too, which obviously the John Lennon reference. Are we talking about no heaven, or are we talking about no heaven and no God? 'Cause
Well, is that a rhetorical question to the person?
no, I mean what we're talking
I,
about tonight.
yeah.
Because
I mean, if you take it in general, like there are religions. I don't know how. I mean, I know at least one that they're not deists. I mean, like Jainism is a religion, but it doesn't have a deity.
yeah,
I found it really strange, but it is what
Taoism
it is.
as well.
Okay. Yeah. So there are like a few like religions that there's no deity there. So you can have religion without heaven.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on the basis we're just sort of
if you're talking about a Christian,
taking away the prize at the end, but
yeah.
it's.
But that's the thing is like so that's where the whole like cheeky question came, and it was to be honest, I didn't came from John Lennon. I don't like him. Like I don't like his music. I don't like Beatles. I don't know. That's my thing. Like,
I
but
should say any views expressed in this podcast are personal
that's like it's my personal
or
taste.
whatever
Yeah.
webcast thing. I don't know. Whatever we are.
Dave Grohl, which I love him as a musician. He's a big fan of Beatles. So, like, I mean, they're very good friends with what's his name,
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney. Yeah. So like, horses for courses. I don't know.
Total aside, but there are increasing rumours that when the Rolling Stones tour, because the now surviving members of the Rolling Stones are without a rhythm section, there is talk of McCartney and Ringo Starr playing with them, which,
Okay.
I mean, the mind boggles really. But anyway, not our genre. So let's move on from that.
Yeah. So the whole idea was, and we spoke about it a little bit, like out of microphone. That the whole idea was it came to me from a conversation I had with a minister, and it was like, if there was no heaven, would it still we would still worth following Jesus? So it was like mostly a rhetorical question. It was a what if question. It wasn't like, let's create a schism in church and create another denomination. It was like those conversations we have, like, what if, and you take it to an extreme, but you take it to extreme to make a point of, like, if we didn't have the reassurance of him, like obviously Paul says, if we only in this life we count, we are what's the point, basically. But in the what if context, this kind of, would you still follow Jesus if it wasn't that gimmick at the end? Not gimmick. I don't say like heaven's a gimmick. Like
Motivation.
For some people might be, it's like if there's no reward at the end.
So yeah, I've been thinking about this.
If I get my point, I don't want to make it sound in a different way that I wanted to make it sound. That's why I kind of.
So I get something that's actually often bugged me is because you go to church and you hear an awful lot of talk about the hope of eternal life and heaven and all of that, and certainly over quite a lot of years, and it's not just Christianity that's guilty of this. It's sort of it's either sort of bribery, follow the teaching, or you won't get to this wonderful place, or a threat. If you don't follow this teaching, you'll go to the other place. Which means the motivation becomes very self-centered, which is a total antithesis of what Christianity is about.
Yeah,
it's about not being self-centered. It's about thinking of other people.
If you think about like the how they call them, the street evangelists, like I don't know a lot of them, but the first thought everyone it comes to everyone's mind when they listen like the term street evangelist, they come fire and brimstone.
Yeah,
So
and
a person sitting in the middle of the road screaming to people to repent, and otherwise you go to hell.
yeah,
And
and
it's kind of, and people don't even believe in the hell. And like it's like
exactly, yeah, and if you don't
it
believe
makes
in
it even
heaven,
more
you're not going to
absurd.
believe in hell. So it's for me the wrong starting point.
Yeah,
Um,
but
but yeah, so I mean, the question then comes: well, if there, or my view maybe is, if there was no heaven, does that actually change anything? Because that's, for me, not what it's all about. I don't know what's going to happen when I die. I am concerned with what happens to me in this life and what happens to those around me. So my motivation is more geared maybe around the now than the what if future.
what if you say like Jesus is teaching, and so what we read the the books that made to the to the New Testament, they were heavily focused on what you're doing in this life, how you
Yeah,
what you do with
absolutely.
your money, what you do with your time, what how you treat people that they had nothing to you have nothing to gain from, how you treat people that they inferior that not inferior that they like uh so under your leadership or rule. uh I mean, back then it would be your rule because you'll be a master and you have slaves.
Yeah,
So basically, I mean, you can see how groundbreaking it was also was, isn't it? Like in a society that slavery was the norm, even within the Jewish community. Like if you own someone money, you cannot pay them, you become a slave to them and you work for free and you get all the abuse under the sun until you repay your debts.
yeah,
And then Jesus comes in, so like you actually, you have to treat your slaves like brothers.
mm.
So for me, like because we can some may take it like like the Bible like uh, approves slavery, but that statement takes it even more groundbreaking than the abolition of slavery.
Mm.
So
I
you
think
not just
the,
like
the
let
Bible,
your slaves go free. You take them and live with you
yeah, the,
and
the Bible
you become
acknowledges a
family.
society that included slavery. I'm not sure it
Mm.
actually condones it. It's a statement of fact. Pretty much every civilization, certainly in the
Yeah.
ancient world and up to 200 years ago, relied on slavery. So
Mm.
it was just there. But yeah, as you say, Jesus preached all people being equal, treat your slaves well, treat your inferiors well, treat everyone well, as treat
Mm.
everyone as you'd want to be treated yourself.
I think like one of the most, I mean, for me, one of the things that Paul actually wrote, for me, is one of the most, especially taken to the context of that age, probably was one of the most radical things someone could have said. And I'm talking about the verse where say like, there's no male or female, there's no
Mm.
rich or poor, there's no slave or master, you are equal, we are all the same under Jesus. Like, there's like, it's like a bulldozer coming
That's
and
massive, isn't it?
yeah, there's no pastors or there's no laity
Mm.
or priesthood. You can extend it as much as you wanted, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's massive. We're all created. We all fall short of God's glory. Um, we're all on a level playing field. We all sin.
Yeah,
Even the nice people.
we do.
Even me. You know, you.
Yeah, it happens to the best.
And the worst.
What can I say? But
Yeah, the other thing on that, I guess, is it says in a number of places we don't earn our way to heaven by our good deeds. Um, It's through faith in Jesus Christ. The good deeds fall from trying to get closer to God. They're
But
not
yeah, and
doing the
I
good
think that,
deeds doesn't get us closer to God. So
and I think with that, with sometimes, I think it is amazing is how even this we manage a lot of times in churches we manage to make it like a miserable statement.
yeah,
Oh, we're not worthy of God's glory. We're nothing. No, actually, it's like that's why we have that example of uh, parent and child love. Like our children haven't they haven't done anything to deserve our love.
yeah,
We just love them. It's exactly the same thing. It's not that we like
absolutely, yeah.
we saw like despicable beings that we deserve hell, and like God is the nice guy that comes like the Deus ex machina that comes and says, oh, no, it's exactly like it's basically like you can't do anything because like God won't stop loving you. Like it is in His nature. Like you can't do it. This is what we don't. We've done nothing to deserve God's love. You just have it. It's a given. You don't have to do anything to deserve it. Like you just have it anyway. You like it or not, or you want it or not.
There's a big difference between not worthy and falling short. We fall short of the glory of God, but we're all created by God and therefore worthy of His love.
But even this is a logical statement, isn't it? Because like God is God. You can't be, and it's not something we should be taking it as another thing to make us feel even worse. It's just like you can't reach God's glory. That's like gravity. It's like you can't do anything about it. You just accept it and you live your life the best way you can.
Yeah, it's also, I think, if we get into that mindset of, oh, we're not worthy, it's actually a slap in the face for God, because God's saying, that this redemption is available, and we're saying, oh, but I'm not worthy of it. It's like, if someone gives you a pair of socks at Christmas, oh, I'm really not worthy of you giving me a Christmas present.
Yeah.
And so you take it back. I won't have anything to do with it.
That's a nice example. It's also reminding me the whole. Go on, sorry.
No, it's just I'm also put in mind. If you know the film Monty Python and the Holy Grail,
it's my favorite Christian movie.
Oh, there you go. So
this and Dogma.
Life of Brian, but there you go.
This. No, sorry, it's Life of Brian. No, sorry.
Yeah. No, Holy Grail. So there's a scene that sort of God appears to King Arthur, who falls on his knees and says, "Oh Lord, I'm not worthy." And God just says, "Oh, stop groveling." I hate it when people grovel. So anyway.
And something we were talking about the other day is the whole fire and brimstone, because like you have like whole generations of evangelism, being actually evangelists. Evangelism was like based around hell.
Yeah.
Which is the base of every abusive relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you actually we churches were evangelizing God as an abusive husband. So don't leave me because I will beat your shit out of you.
I'm not sure that's a historic thing as well. I think that still goes on. I think
I mean, I think it gets like, because as time moves, I think like fundamentalism becomes less and less relevant. It's like phasing out. So it's just people don't buy in it anymore, basically. So if you have the street evangelists with fire and brimstone, they can become like the town jester, basically, like people passing by having a laugh with a weird guy that sounds obscenities to people, like
I think we're drifting a little off track. So I thought I'd have a little trawl in the Bible, because that's always a good point of reference to things like this. When we're imagining half the Bible doesn't exist. Although there's not much in the Bible
Yeah.
to explain what heaven is, if you listen to our last broadcast.
And we still,
Yeah,
we still, we're not on the same page. So both of us, we don't believe the same thing about what heaven is, isn't it?
well,
But
Bible
we're
is
very
remarkably
close. We're
silent,
very
so
close, but it's still
we
like we
can
still.
guess. It's all
Yeah,
guesswork. It's fine.
that's fine. Like,
Yeah. Actually, I read something today which
it's good.
gave another
It's
slant on it, because something we totally ignored last time was the fact that Revelation ends up with a physical heaven rather than a sort of spiritual one.
So
And we didn't even get into that.
so
So
what I was saying, like that, heaven, like eternity, will be in a on, on a planet that was meant to be on.
yeah,
Actually, we're going back to Genesis 1 and
yeah,
2, the first two
starting
chapters
again.
of
Yeah.
Genesis, starting all over again.
But that was last time's. Yeah. So anyway, a couple of verses that I've sort of picked on. One is in 1 Timothy 4, verse 8. Godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. So the following of godliness, the following of Jesus' teaching, as you say, there's an awful lot in the New Testament about lifestyle and interactions and relationships and all that sort of thing, is geared towards living a better life in this life. It's not just about getting into heaven.
But it's not just simply living a better life in this life. It's
Yeah,
actually more
absolutely.
geared on making other people's lives better in
Yeah.
this life. So you should be focusing more on making other people's lives better.
Because,
That will be your
again,
main focus.
it's not all about self. That's the whole
Yeah.
point. The whole fall.
I'm not saying like to disregard that you shouldn't look to make your life better, because I think self-love is like Jesus said, like you should love your God as you love yourself, and your neighbor as you love yourself. So you have to love yourself first, your own body and your own life,
I don't
and
think there's anything.
then you extend that love to your neighbor and God and like
I
creation.
think it's more comparison. It works on the presumption that everyone loves themselves, at least to some extent, and then that should be reflected. They shouldn't apply a lesser standard to other people. I don't think there's anything that I can think of in the Bible that actually says, you should have more self-esteem, because how much more do you need? God loves you
They didn't
unconditionally.
know self-esteem. They didn't know trauma.
Well, no,
and-
but sort of think better of yourself, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. But it is all about interactions with other people, which, if you've got good relationships, that naturally builds you up. So the other verse is in 1 Peter 3, or verses. Whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. And the only reason I sort of pick on that one, it says nothing about eternal life or heaven. It's just talking about the now. If you want to have a great life, do right stuff, Put self aside. Don't lie to people. Don't speak evil. Don't whatever. Choose good. And that's the route to having a better life. And certainly, if you look at, there's a whole bunch of things in the Sermon on the Mount where actually it's just fundamental good lifestyle teaching.
Well,
It's
to be
all
honest,
about-
if you throw all the Bible and you keep that the Sermon on the Mount, you can start again.
Yeah. In fact, yeah, 2 chapters of Matthew.
Yeah.
Everything you need pretty much is there.
Yeah. So you don't have to read the whole Bible. Just like, can you start with those 2 pages? You literally, everything else is just commentary.
Yeah. But it's, if you go in Waterstones or whatever, there's whole shelves of lifestyle books, and none of them say anything better than those 2 chapters of Matthew. Avoid being angry. Keep your word. Don't seek revenge.
And they're quite
Not-
revolutionary words, especially, isn't it?
Oh, incredibly. Yeah.
And I mean, society didn't change much through the. I mean, it was the big fish ate the small one since always. It's nothing new. So like a
Yeah.
lot of people like the society today, that was always like this. And I think back then was even worse
Mm.
because at least now you have, if you the small fish, there are still
There's a veneer of
ways
civilization.
to get your right. Back then it was like, yeah, let me see your P60. It's like under 20 grand a year. No, no, that's not, no,
Yeah.
go away. Like, I don't care.
Yes. Yeah. You're in the way of my horse. I'm going to ride over you. You know?
Yeah. And Jesus comes and said, like, those people, like, that you step with your horse, they're gonna inherit the eternal the eternal life, that
Yeah.
will be king. Like, I have to, like, I don't like the whole king and kingdom language, but, like, that was their
It's
language then, yeah.
again, it's a language available in the context, isn't it?
Mm.
You can substitute words, I'm sure,
Yeah.
without royalist connotations. But yeah, it's God's domain, if you like.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, as you say, just looking at the Sermon on the Mount as being a good fundamental basis of all the teaching that sort of Jesus came out with. Does it matter if there's a heaven? You know, the world would be a better place if everyone followed the Sermon on the Mount.
Mm. I mean, there is heaven in
Well,
what is heaven?
what,
We can
what a
we can
bonus!
disagree.
That's absolutely.
How it looks like that we can, but definitely something like it's central to our faith. Not central, like say it's one of the key elements of our faith. Like, but the most critical stuff of our faith is what you're doing in this life,
Yeah,
and the whole one of the things that on the imagine there's no heaven is it becomes a gimmick, not from God's side, not from the biblical teaching side. It becomes a gimmick for Christians.
Mm.
So I'm a good Christian, so which means I'm going to church every Sunday and tithe and listen to someone's opinion, because it is someone's opinion. Like,
because that's
I
all
don't
there
say
is to it.
I don't say that as a derogatory term. But every sermon, when I'm preaching, I'm just sharing my opinion about some things from the Bible. It's my opinion. You're free to disagree with me. Like, well, I can't do anything if you're coming from a different place.
In fact, wouldn't it be great if you came and talked to me about it?
Yeah, but that's the
That-
thing. Like, it's someone's
we-
opinion that goes unchallenged. Not unchallenged. It goes like no one ever talks about it, because, like, But again, like, I'm not against it. It's kind of like, because we kind of in the church we kind of made it the center of the Christian faith. It kind of becomes something like pointless, because, like, that's not what Jesus didn't. It's like Neil Cole actually said, like, a lot of Christians believe that Jesus died on the cross just for them to change the Sunday routine. You know what I mean? Like, Jesus died on the cross, so I just have a different Sunday.
Yeah.
The Sunday's changed now. But if you see, like, the actual reasons why Jesus died on the cross, but that's for another time to go through. It was,
Yeah, that's a whole different conversation.
yeah, it was like highly. He was a pain. He was a thorn on everyone's back, isn't it?
Because of this radical teaching.
Yeah.
But
It
the last
didn't-
thing people in authority, and especially religious people in authority, want to hear is that everyone's equal and going to suffer the same fate.
Yeah. He didn't maybe end up on the cross because he was a hippie talking about, hello, let's do drugs and love each other. You know, you die that humiliating death because you're a serious threat.
And
And
and if he wasn't actually serious about what he was saying, he had a number of opportunities to back down. He could have avoided it.
yeah,
Um,
it wasn't just for the sake of taking people to heaven.
no,
It was like to radically change the history of the world, the flow of history, uh, which is, it's kind of where the point is. And it's going back to what I was saying, like heaven being a gimmick is, so this is all I have to do. So it's like I have to follow certain rules, then I'll go to heaven. It's kind of, but it's then again, like it's like kind of, and going back to the other thing I quite came to believe, then becomes actually a thing that people actually have severe death anxiety. That's why they need to grab on a heaven to have like a. It's a wrong way to treat death anxiety, basically. And death anxiety, in one way or another, it's in all of us. We all have it. It's part of our. It's like it's part of being human.
yeah,
Death anxiety. You can't get rid of it. You will always like struggle. We will always struggle with the idea of death. Even like in as a believer, like I said, I'm not afraid to die. Like again, I say it like quite lightly, but like it's always because the great unknown.
Hmm.
It's like no one ever came back to tell us what's on the other side. We have proof some near-death experiences. There's actually research happening on that, but from non-believers, that's an important note.
but also their near-death experiences and
Yeah.
what influences the mind when it's in a state of trauma, probably anesthetic and anything else.
Yeah,
That's
and
not
everyone
that's not
says
necessarily the basis for.
it was very interesting. Everyone was describing, although there was like a kind of a common narrative. What people saw was different depending on their faith.
Yeah,
So Buddhists saw a Buddha, Christians were seeing Jesus or God, Muslims may have like Muhammad or Allah. So it very. I think probably the subconscious was filling up the gaps, but pretty much like the whole experience had a lot of like commonalities, even between people of like, because even people with no faith, they had near death experiences.
Hmm.
It's kind of interesting.
yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of more into psychology than
Hmm.
anything else.
But it's kind of, I
We
think that
only
it's
actually
something,
die once, so we'll only find out what's on the other side
unless you're
once,
Lazarus,
unless you're Lazarus. Yes,
you die twice.
and he kept remarkably quiet about it after the event, didn't he? I mean, I'd again, totally aside, but I'd love to know some of these people's sort of story. You know, sort of walking into town the next day and say, "Oh, Lazarus, didn't you die?" You know, I mean, I've got
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
a talk on Lazarus in a few weeks, so maybe,
Ah,
maybe I'll get some insight.
they
Come
talk
back.
about death anxiety
Yeah,
to
well,
get people depressed.
yeah, I got better.
Yeah,
Back
but
to Monty
yeah, I
Python
think,
again.
and I think like the whole idea of death anxiety is not. It's not talked at churches. I don't think like anyone knows how to talk about fear of death, and it's the fear of death that makes us not talking about it. It's like if we not talk about it, it's gonna just go away.
I think
We not
it's
out of sight, out of mind.
that, that's possibly a more sort of 20th century sort of view, because death is somehow more controlled. That there are protections in society, and unless you're in a war situation. In the Middle Ages, death was a part of everyday existence. It was,
probably you die when you're
half the
30 or
children died in the first year, and unless you were in the ruling class, you had a very poor sort of health record. And
that's why everyone was getting married. Like they were starting family when they were like 14.
because
It wasn't enough time. Like the
Yeah.
see.
So I think maybe they had a better handle on death, although maybe it was more pressing to imagine what was next,
I don't know.
or be influenced by what was
We will
next.
never know, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
There wasn't any psychotherapy back then.
is that a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
let's say like where do I believe in heaven or pretend I'm following Jesus because I'm afraid to die?
But that's the argument put by a lot of preachers, isn't it? It's basically that when you die and you're going to die, it'll be even worse because you'll go to hell if you don't do what I say.
Yeah,
No
that's abuse,
motivation.
isn't it? That's basically playing straight out abuse. It's an abusive relationship.
And playing on people's self-interest. Oh, it's fine. It's sort of a, if you like, so again, Middle Ages, a practice of popes selling indulgences. If a noble went out and slaughtered a village on a whim, he could then go to the pope and buy his way back into the kingdom of heaven.
But back then you could excuse this compliance because people didn't know. They couldn't even read. So they will take in what the priest was telling them as a given.
But the nobility were taught by priests and such like, so they did know.
Yeah, but the nobility.
But they were told
care.
they could buy their way out of it.
But the nobility also was saying like you're kind of appointed by God to be rich, and as long you build a church, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's sort of build me a church and I'll forgive you. It's not actually in your power.
Yeah. And then the rest of your life was like Game of Thrones turned to 11.
So rather poorly conceived and a bad ending.
Yeah. I know.
Never send your archers out against cavalry.
Don't go into like Game of Thrones now. Like,
Yeah.
On a side note, I was because I'm an epic fantasy geek. When I started watching Game of Thrones, I wasn't saying to men like I didn't want to say to people that I'm watching Game of Thrones, but because I felt bad about it or shame. It's like I didn't want people to start saying, you shouldn't watch this stuff, and like you have too much nudity, too much violence. Like I didn't want to go there. And then I was like, keep meeting like people like in church, like watching game. Like I have a friend that actually named his son Theon from Theon Greyjoy.
Yeah, that's a role model.
Like, yeah, okay, like I wasn't the only one.
My at the time 14-year-old son used to send my wife to bed because it wasn't suitable for her to watch. Which I think he meant I'm not sitting there with my mother watching this.
I mean, to be honest, like it was far too much nudity, and I got annoyed with it. In general, I'm getting annoyed with when a film has too much sexualized image, because like I'm not here to watch a soft porn. I'm here to watch like an epic fantasy film full of violence. I want people guts out.
I think in part it's an HBO thing. You get a lot of HBO series which in the first series there's an awful lot of nudity.
Yeah, I think it was a gimmick to draw people in, basically.
It draws people in, and you find the nudity trails off in sort of series 8 or something.
Yeah, because the Game of Thrones after like third season was like hardly any. It was like it was good because like I I could.
Or it's
I
more
mean, I was
contextual.
like watching the first season, I was skipping, skip. Like I don't want to watch. Like I'm against porn anyway. So like, anyway, I think we could wrap these
We've
things up
drifted off topic.
with a Game of Thrones epilogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can wrap these things up, and we make a vow. We made a vow to keep our podcast on about 45 minutes anyway. So, so it keep us from drifting too much.
Didn't work, but there you go.
Maybe we can do a podcast what we can learn from Game of Thrones.
So yeah, if you've got any comments about, or further comments, in fact, if you're one of those people who commented before about what you think it would be like in respect to faith, if there was no heaven, stick comments below. If you've got any thoughts on Game of Thrones, stick your comments below.
Yeah, we can start a ranting thread about Game of Thrones. And also keep this whole watch the space as we kind of work in. We're talking with a few bands and try to find a venue so we can throw a gig in the area, and we're gonna have some fun. It's not gonna be Christian bands primarily. Yeah, it's just we want to,
But we will be there, and you can meet us in the flesh.
and we can
That's what we
Bible
think.
bash you. We're gonna bring big Bibles like the beast, and we can bash people like
And
as
bash
they're walking
everybody.
out, like at the back of their heads, like. Anyway, okay.
So yeah, watch your
see
space,
you.
and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, in 2 weeks, I have a recorded interview. I don't remember which one is it. It will be a recorded interview from some person in the heavy metal ministry talking about what they're doing within the metal community. Until that time, and we will be back with Roger in 4 weeks with
4
we
weeks.
don't know what.
Could
Yeah.
even be Game of Thrones.
We never know. what the spirit will lead.
Indeed.
Bye.
God bless.